Bonjour and welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're all about those tricky French verb collocations and expressions.
They're so important.
I know, right? And I'm thinking this will really help folks working towards that pronunciator certificate on common collocations. We got some great source material here. It's like a fast track to sounding more natural, more French,
Oh, absolutely.
So imagine yourself, right, at a cafe in Paris, casually dropping these phrases into conversation.
I love that.
That's the goal. But first, before we get ahead of ourselves, what exactly are these verb collocations? Our listeners might be thinking, wait, refresh my memory.
Right. Good point. In the simplest terms, verb collocations are all about knowing which verbs naturally go with which prepositions or nouns.
Okay.
And it's about creating these expressions that, well, French speakers actually use.
Makes sense.
The tricky part is these pairings. They don't always translate word for word from English.
So that's where the trouble starts. Got an example, something to illustrate this.
Oh, tons. But one that always comes to mind is make a decision.
Okay.
Straightforward in English. But in French, you wouldn't say faire une décision, which is the literal translation.
Right.
Instead, you'd say prendre une décision, which literally translates to take a decision.
So you're not just making a decision, you're like seizing it. Taking charge.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. I never thought of it that way.
And that's what's so cool about collocations. They often reveal these subtle cultural nuances, these ways of thinking, things you might miss if you were just translating like word for word.
That's such a good point. It's like getting into the French mindset, not just the words themselves.
Totally.
Okay. So how do we even begin to learn all these collocations? There are so many. Is there a system? Please tell me there's a system.
Don't worry. There is. Think of them in categories. Like instead of learning them randomly, we group them.
Okay, yeah.
Based on, say, actions, emotions, or concepts they express. Makes it way more manageable.
Like organizing a messy closet. I love that.
Yeah.
Everything in its place.
Exactly.
So where do we start this collocation closet cleanup? What's our first stop?
Let's start with actions. That's, the foundation of most conversations. We use verbs to describe what we do.
Makes sense. Let me see. Oh. Okay, here's one from the source material that's perfect. Faire du vélo, to ride a bike. Simple, but so important.
Right. And notice that preposition do, it's crucial.
Oh, yeah.
You wouldn't just say faire vélo on its own. That preposition links the verb faire to the activity vélo.
It's always the little things, isn't it? Those tiny details that can trip you up. Do you find learners struggle with prepositions in these collocations?
All the time. I mean, prepositions are tricky in any language, but French prepositions, they're in a league of their own.
They do seem to have a mind of their own.
Like they enjoy playing hide and seek with logic, but mastering these prepositional collocations is essential if you want to express yourself properly.
Okay, so how can our listeners use that Pronunciator Library module to tackle these prepositions? Got any insider tips? From the expert herself.
Oh, the library module is fantastic for this. It has so many audio examples of native speakers using these collocations in context. So you not only learn the phrase, you hear how it's pronounced, how it's actually used.
So you're not just memorizing, you're getting that sound, that rhythm of the language.
Exactly. It's about training your ear and your tongue to work together to produce these authentic sounding French expressions.
Love it. Okay, so back to actions. Let's see. Oh, this one's a good one. Prendre une douche, to take a shower. I feel like prendre pops up everywhere.
It does. Prendre is one of those super versatile verbs that partners with all sorts of nouns to create different actions. Like prendre un café, which means to have a coffee.
Yeah.
Or prendre un rendez-vous, to make an appointment.
I bet you have a fun way to remember all the different uses of prendre. Some kind of mnemonic device.
Well, I always tell my students, think of prendre as a little grabby hand, reaching out, taking hold of something.
Okay.
Whether it's a shower, a coffee, even an appointment. It's silly, but it helps.
I love it. It's those little tricks that make all the difference. It's not just brute force memorization. It's about finding those connections that help things stick.
Exactly. That's what makes language learning so rewarding. It's a constant process of discovery and creative thinking.
And speaking of discovery, there's another action-packed collocation here. Passer un examen, to take an exam. Sounds so much more elegant in French, doesn't it?
It does. Again, that preposition is key.
Right.
It's like saying you're going to spend time on an exam. Way more active way of thinking about it.
And less intimidating than saying take an exam. It's like you're approaching it with a sense of calm and focus.
Exactly. It's all about mindset, right?
Right.
And you know what? This actually leads us perfectly into our next category. Emotions.
Ooh.
Collocations can help us express feelings in a much more nuanced, authentic way.
All right.
Yeah.
Bring on the emotions. I'm ready.
So we've talked about how collocations, like, they bring actions to life in French, right? But what about emotions?
Oh, yeah, good point.
Language isn't just about what we do, it's about how we feel, too.
Absolutely. Okay, let's dive into some feelings then, see what we can find in these sources.
Ooh.
This one jumped out at me. Avoir peur, to be afraid. Pretty straightforward, right? Or is there more to it?
Oh, there's always more to it. Avoir peur, yeah, it's the common way to say to be afraid. But French has so many expressions to show different shades of fear.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Well, you could say avoir la frousse. It's more colloquial, kind of like scared stiff.
So it's like choosing the right shade of blue.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
You want the one that perfectly captures that emotion.
And that's where mastering collocations becomes like an art form.
I like that. An art form.
Finding those perfect expressions that really hit those nuances of feeling.
Okay, I'm ready for another shade of emotion. Hit me with a collocation that's a bit more uplifting.
All right, how about avoir envie de? It means to feel like doing something, to have a desire.
Oh.
It's great for those moments of inspiration or even just cravings, like j'ai envie de manger une crêpe au chocolat. I feel like eating a chocolate crepe.
Ooh. Now that's something I can relate to. It's so much more expressive than just saying I want. You get that sense of like longing, excitement.
Exactly, that's what I mean. Collocations let you go beyond just the words. You get those deeper layers of emotion.
Love it. Speaking of layers, I'm curious about those more complex emotions, like love. Are there collocations for that?
Well, you've got the classic je t'aime, of course, that always works. But there are so many beautiful ways to express those different sides of love.
I bet. Like,
Tomber amoureux de, to fall in love with. It really captures that feeling of, being swept off your feet.
so romantic.
It is. Like you're surrendering to love, letting yourself be totally consumed by it. Much more poetic than just saying to love.
Absolutely. It's like painting a picture with words, right?
Yeah.
Creating a whole emotional scene. This makes me realize that learning collocations, it's so much more than just grammar or vocab.
Right.
It's about connecting with the culture on a deeper level, expressing yourself more fully.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Which brings us to another key aspect of collocations, time. Because how we express ourselves is often shaped by the context of time.
Yes. Here come those tricky French tenses, right? Like passé composé, en parfait.
You got it. French verbs, they have this amazing way of dancing with time.
They do.
And collocations are part of that choreography. Take venir de, for example.
Okay.
It means to have just done something.
Yeah.
Perfect for those actions that happened very recently, like the ink is still drying.
Ooh, I love that image. You're capturing that snapshot of the past.
Right.
How would you use it in a sentence?
Imagine you just saw a great movie. You could say, Je viens de voir un film incroyable. I have just seen an incredible movie. You get that excitement, that immediacy.
Yes, like you're still buzzing from the experience. Way more vivid than just I saw.
Exactly. And notice how venir de uses the passé composé. It emphasizes that recent completion of the action.
Right.
So mastering these time-related collocations, it's crucial for navigating those different time zones in French grammar.
This is really making me think, collocations, they're like the secret ingredient to sounding fluent.
They are.
They add that flavor, that depth, that je ne sais quoi, that makes your French sound truly authentic.
Absolutely. And the best part is you never stop learning. There are always new collocations to discover, new ways to express yourself.
Speaking of discoveries, let's move on to a category that I think often trips people up. Those pesky prepositions.
Oh, I agree.
I touched on them earlier, but I think they deserve a deep dive of their own.
Absolutely. French prepositions, they're famous for their quirky behavior.
They are a bit mischievous.
Like little sprites playing tricks on language learners.
All right, well, I'm ready. Bring on the prepositions. All right, we're back. And it's time for those small but mighty words, prepositions.
They can be a bit tricky.
They are. It's like they're the glue holding collocations together, but sometimes that glue is a little loose.
I like that analogy. And yeah, they're essential for meaning, but often they don't translate directly from English.
Exactly. It's like why in penser à, which is to think about, but then de in avoir besoin de, to need. Seems so random.
It can seem that way, but often there's a subtle logic behind it.
Okay.
For example, à in penser à suggests a direction of thought, like focusing on something. Whereas de in avoir besoin de implies a lack, a need that has to be filled.
Ah, I see. So it's not just memorizing, it's understanding that relationship the preposition creates.
Exactly. And that's where the pronunciator library module is so helpful.
Wow.
It gives you tons of examples of prepositions in different contexts, so you start to see the patterns.
It's like having a cheat sheet.
Kind of, yeah. It helps you crack the code.
Okay, let's put on our detective hats and look at some tricky ones from our sources. What's a good one to start with?
How about s'intéresser à, to be interested in? That à is crucial and points to what you're interested in.
So if I wanted to say, I'm interested in French cinema, it would be, je m'intéresse au cinéma français.
Perfect. You got it.
Not bad, not bad. But I bet there are some tougher ones out there.
Oh, there are always tougher ones. How about rêver de, to dream of? The de is key here. It links rêver to what you're dreaming about.
So, I dream of living in Paris would be, je rêve de vivre à Paris.
Exactly. And notice how à comes up again, this time for location. Prepositions, they're busy little words.
They really are. I'm starting to see them as like the unsung heroes of French. Small but powerful.
Couldn't agree more. Mastering them is a huge step toward fluency.
So, for our listeners aiming for that pronunciator certificate, any last tips on conquering these prepositional collocations?
Honestly, practice, practice, practice.
Of course.
The more you hear and see authentic French, the more those patterns will click. Listen to podcasts, watch movies, read books.
Immerse yourself.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to make mistakes.
That's how we learn.
Exactly. It's all about experimenting, trying things out.
Well said. Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into French verb collocations and expressions. We've covered so much.
We have.
From the basics to those tricky prepositions. But hopefully, we've shown you how rich and nuanced these expressions can make your French.
I hope so too. And remember, this is just the beginning. Keep exploring, keep practicing, and most importantly, have fun with it.
Merci beaucoup for joining us on this deep dive. And to all our listeners, bonne chance with your pronunciator journey. We can't wait to hear you using these collocations with confidence.